I don't follow any religion or such. I just follow some kind of some principles. I grew up with the films of Bruce Lee, kind of imposed on me by my father. My Irish family was Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
My French side was more atheist. I'm not a person who follows doctrine. Sometimes you need to open up to the idea that there's energy around, and perhaps energy other people have an effect, can affect your moods and can affect your circumstances as well. Yeah, so yeah, I'm very much believe these things. I'm very open to it. Anyway, yeah. What would be the reason to know when you found out? What would you achieve? You know, surely the idea is to appreciate that things were created, but the idea of try to to question a creator, I've reached a point in my life where I don't feel it's necessary. It's almost an impossible question, and sometimes I think that's nice in a way to have that impossibility. And so why not within your own space, turn inside of yourself and have a look, rather than try to worry about a creator, worry about the creation, which is you. I can see from my life that people falling into traps where they try to design the world into how they imagine it to be. Death is just the time before you were born. I don't personally believe that it's quite as black and white, good and bad, and so I don't think there would be really a judgment. I think humans maybe sometimes think too much of themselves. You know, what happens at the end, I think it is becoming more and more irrelevant. Never thought to engage with somebody and say, oh, right, so as a Christian, what do you believe about this and this and the other? Which is, now I'm reflecting, is it maybe a shame. I've had a lot of alternate views that I've inquired into, or it's been projected out. Sometimes for people to manipulate other people or to draw you into something. And I have been victim to this. I found with religion that often when I was around it, when someone had the idea that you might want to join in, it was like all or nothing. You're full in, or you're out. I've never been so self-confident, and I've never felt so empowered. I don't even know if I'm an atheist or not sometimes, but it doesn't matter, because whoever I meet, I treat them as the same as anybody else, and I'm willing to listen to what they have to say, and if they're willing not to throw it on to me, I will happily spend hours. I've never had more control than now, and I feel that it's worth me trying to improve me.
Hello, I've just had a very, very lengthy conversation with a pleasant gentleman, but it did go on for a long time, and it was quite good to speak to him. I think it was apparent that I think he's gone through a lot. He's gone through personally quite a journey, I think, in terms of the things that he has applied himself to. Seems like he was involved in a number of different movements, maybe groups, all of them to an extent where he would give kind of piece of him to that movement, to that group, whether it was being driven some of the new age ideas or some of the other philosophies. And it seems like he's gotten to a stage now where he wants to just push back from everything and just work on himself a little bit, just kind of find that find a kind of personal area of personal independence, of thinking, and of acting, of believing, and so sounds like he appreciated what I was telling him, but I think it's going to be maybe a little bit of time before he finds it within him to apply himself to a kind of a movement or an idea that he's being asked to consider, to follow, even though he was quite gracious and appreciated the things that I'm telling him about Christian worldview, about our beliefs, about the gospel. All of those things seem to make sense, but I think for them to hit hard, to hit home, I think he needs a little bit of space to have a think about it. So I do pray he does. Again, he was a very pleasant gentleman. Sounds like he's on a journey of his own. He wants to ultimately find out what the truth is. And yeah, I do pray that he gives serious consideration to the God of the Bible, even though it might be something that he's heard before or being presented with in different ways. I wish that he would approach it with a new heart, new sort of understanding, new mind, almost pure as a child, and start just reading the Bible for what it says without the baggage or lenses of other ideologies that come with it, and that God would meet him when he does so, that he would open up his heart so that he will be able to speak to him directly as a child of God, and that God would grant him the Holy Spirit, the understanding would follow, encouragement, the joy of belief would follow, certainty of life, and the hope that we have as Christians would follow at that moment. So that's my prayer for him, and to pray maybe I'll meet him again, and we'll see how things went for him. So in the meantime, yeah, have a look at the video. I was trying to put all the key bits up front for those who cannot necessarily wait for the full conversation to play itself out. But yeah, as always, leave a comment, tell me what you thought, and see you in the next video. Bye. Do you have any faith or belief or religion?
I don't follow any religion or such. I just follow some kind of some principles, personal principles. Some of them from obviously that you learn from your parents, but some through some martial arts practice.
Okay.
When I was younger, just following some kind of you could call it Asian martial arts, but I suppose it's sort of global now, so it's kind of accepted as in a global thing. So yeah, just following some. I grew up with the films of Bruce Lee, kind of imposed on me by my father, and so that had obviously had an effect. And in the 70s, we had a lot of programs. Mostly, they had a lot of violence in them, but they also had some spirituality in them.
Yeah.
There was some strange shows from Japan, one called Monkey Magic, and there was another program, another series that was called Kung Fu.
Yeah.
And originally that was supposed to be Bruce Lee's role, but it was given to another American gentleman, maybe because they thought he was more suitable. Yeah. And these had effects on me as a child. Certain principles and certain rites of passage that you go through. So yeah, that would be my kind of no set religion. My Irish family was Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
My French side was more atheist, I'd say. So it was quite, apart from having to go to church on Sundays, it was quite open to make your own choice. So
yeah.
That's what I did.
And today, would you say you still practice martial arts? You still try to keep your practices up to date? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously in the modern world, it's all compromised, but I feel that I have to, just sort of for sanity, really. I'm not really, I would say, completely at one with being in a very busy setting, and I also work in very busy places. So yeah, it's something that I have to do in order to sort of be able to cope as a single person without having certain buffers and certain other people around me. I feel that I have to fall back on uh, exercise and some spiritual kind of grounding that I've picked up from many influences.
Yeah.
And now with the internet and podcasts, that you get to hear a lot more personal views of people,
Yes.
and yeah, you have a much more, a less, how can I put it? You have a less structured approach from large organizations or large bodies. It's more of an individual choice now. You can go in so many directions, and pick so much up. It's almost too much now. It's hard to sort of narrow things down. But yeah, you just have to find what suits you and what you can cope with. But I'm not a person who follows doctrine in general, and I don't really follow a practice of prayer on a regular basis. But yeah, if you want to call it spirituality and soul searching, and I think it's very important to have this, especially in this day and age, where technology seems to be taking over. I think the individual spirit, the more analog way of thinking in the digital world is very, very important.
Maybe if I'm guessing now, and then I'd like to sort of get you to correct me, but in some of those, I'm huge fan of some of those movies. I kind of grew up in the same, maybe not as old as
not
you.
Not quite as old.
No, certainly not as old. But yeah, I certainly grew up revering Bruce Lee and those movies. I was actually quite a big fan of, and I got to think of myself as someone who, if I could. That there seemed to be feeling to me like this energy, right? There's energy, and that we, in our bodies, we could focus that energy, right? And we could make our bodies kind of the tools by which we direct that energy for, certainly for kind of martial art, kind of defense purposes, or when we find ourselves in a bind. Is that the concept that you were sort of maybe alluding to there, in the sense that? Would you say that there is such a thing as energy that you can, within your body, you can kind of shape, you can control, you can direct?
There's definitely energy. I mean, if you look at it from a scientific perspective, if we're electrical to some degree, on say on the lower spectrum, but if everything in the universe is electric and magnetic, then obviously frequency plays a part, and we just know from music, there's even if you don't know much about music, there's sets of frequencies,
harmonies,
and then so there's a lot to it, and and also today you can learn about things like solfeggio, and sort of some people would describe them as sort of sacred frequencies, and certainly even from things like weaponry and things like that, they use certain frequencies, microwaves, the shortwave frequencies, and they can obviously be quite damaging, but they can heat your food, but they can also heat up the atmosphere around them to a degree. And yeah, so I think I think obviously there's a lot more that we don't see. Animals see, have a different perspective of things. They might have be more susceptible to these frequencies. Certainly, you can tell by behaviour of dogs who, they spend a lot of time with people, that their behaviour can seem strange, or they can be very alert or know things before you do. And so I think we're surrounded by, we are like everything is vibrating and everything is moving, and the whole universe doesn't matter really what you believe, it became bigger, smaller, everything is sort of shifting and moving, planets and everything. So I think it's the fundamental of life, frequency and energy. It governs everything, really, it's something that we have to be open to, and now we have more free time, and we have so much more information where we don't have to rely on a library or journal. Then we can choose to learn about these things and sort of delve into it. But I think it's quite obvious now that it's there's a lot going on that we don't realize, and things happen for a reason. It's not accidental, and we have to try to learn more about it and blend into this idea, so we can just survive, and thrive, sometimes ignorance is bliss, but then if things aren't going well, then sometimes you need to open up to the idea that there's energy around, and perhaps energy other people have an effect, can affect your moods and can affect your circumstances as well. I'm very much believe these things. I'm very open to it.
No, it's interesting that you say that, because I kind of resonate with that. Right? Is even the word resonate kind of it kind of invokes some of those ideas that you just mentioned. But would you say behind these, the frequencies, the vibrations, because this all seems to be so complicated and so in tuned and fine tuned in some senses, right? Even the scientists are now sort of recognizing that the universe is just so much more complex than we thought it was, and at the same time it's fine tuned as well, to the extent that the constants that drive the resonance of the atoms, the weak nuclear force, the strong force, the gravitational constant, even the masses of electrons and neutrons and all that kind of stuff. If any one of those were just a little bit off, by the infinitesimal amount, this universe would not exist, right? I guess the question that I'm trying to get to, would you not sort of, or do you see potentially, if this was an orchestra with finely tuned instruments and harmonies kind of playing, is there a maestro? Is there a maestro behind the orchestra? Is there someone who put it all together? Is there someone who is put it all for some purpose and who understands every part of it?
It would seem to be orchestrated by something, but again, humans they tend to try to paint things in their own perspective or image. So if you thought of a god and then saw him as a man, because maybe previously the man seemed to take charge, so you would paint him as a man. This is a very basic way of looking at it. I think it can be a creator. It can be more than one creator. I think there's some indication from books like the Bible that is a possibility that that humans were perhaps created, and maybe by more than one. I think there's a quote from the Bible that humans were created in our image rather than a singular. So whether that denotes creators and then a main main creator, or whether things come about from in a vibrational state, and perhaps gravity being a stronger force or a weaker force can push things together or pull them apart, and then there's a possibility that these things could have come about perhaps without a creator. But then the question is always what created that, what
Exactly.
created the gravity, what created that. And I think you can endlessly go on thinking about that, but I don't think we're not actually meant to know. I mean, what would be the reason to know when you found out? What would you achieve? Surely the idea is to appreciate that things were created, and that we live perhaps maybe many people thought they did live just in a very small place and there was nothing outside of that, and the idea that we might live on a planet that's in a planetary system and then in a universe. For some people in the world, some cultures, that's a new thing. For other cultures, it's an ancient thing. Maybe the Aborigines, I mean, they had many different ideas about how they were created and what they were part of. So people in isolation could come up with many theories, but it doesn't seem to change the fact that sort of business is business, and you need to take care of the fundamentals, which is trying to survive on a planet like this one, which is is beautiful, but it's also savage, because things have to consume other things in order to survive. Things are created and then they break down and they change form. So the idea of death even is different around the world. And some people see it as the end, the termination. Other people see it just a parting, a breakdown, and things move into a different form. So there's many interpretations, but the idea of try to to question a creator, I've reached a point in my life where I don't feel it's necessary, and I've spoken to many people from different religions, from Muslim cultures to Catholics, and they all seem to be on this search. And I personally don't really see. I feel that perhaps we're not. This is too much, that's too big a question. And really, what are you trying to achieve? Maybe the people are not content. They're not happy enough. They need this final answer, solution. But I don't think there is one. I think you just have to. Personally, for me, you just have to appreciate that it came about, and then you navigate through it. But again, it's different for so many people. Some people have a joyful life. Some people suffer all their life. There's so many variations of what can happen to an individual, and so they have a different need in their heart to reach out and look beyond and try to find an answer. But I think it's almost an impossible question, and sometimes I think that's nice in a way to have that impossibility. Do we want the answers to everything in the world? Is it really going to make everything better and you're going to be more content? I think instead of looking always outside, now it's kind of evident you have to go inside. The universe is out there, but it's also in here. If you believe in molecules and atoms and things like that, well then what is out here is in here, and then so you could turn everything inside. And so why not within your own space turn inside of yourself and have a look, rather than try to worry about a creator. Worry about the creation, which is you, and you have more control this way than you probably have the other way. So that's kind of been my philosophy that I've kind of grown into, if you like, through lots of experiences, trauma and things like that, and reflection, contemplation, and having the luxury of a lot of freedom, probably having more freedom than anybody I've ever met. I probably am very blessed in that degree. So I've had time to think about it. Other people are caught to have families very young. They're caught into situations where they don't have the freedom. and the calmness to be able to try to discover these things. They're just involved in day to day. They're caught up in other people's problems. Is we find now, especially with entertainment, that we are distracted, and some people find themselves watching fiction, which reflects reality, which is good because you can learn from it. But then they tend to live a story, another person's life. Luckily, I've had the fortune to in some instances not have the ability to have access to the media or the TV, and so being forced to have to go inside a bit more or spend more time in nature. So I have, the reason I'm in this park is because I chose to walk up and stay here rather than go to another shop, and which is something I've done a lot of. So I try to do the opposite. It's different for everyone, I suppose.
Indeed. You brought up a couple of very interesting points. One of them, for example, about I agree. There's certain mystery, right? And I think it's also true that we will probably not expect that we will ever know the answers this side of life. Certainly not. At the same time, it's also true that we should be on the searching, right, on a journey, on a searching path to not be content necessarily where we are, but there's a path of improvement, but also a path of spiritual deepening and enlightenment. But one thing you also mentioned is about Dad has encouraged you to kind of turn inwards rather than kind of to something that you couldn't quite identify or sort of define. Here's something, right? So from the Bible, because you mentioned it, you probably resonate with the Genesis story of Adam and Eve. I don't know how much you remember that story, but but the story of the fall, right? Here, it'll make sense once I kind of go through it quickly why I'm mentioning it. But Adam and Eve were the first human beings, the first human pair that God has created, and He's given them the entire garden. It was theirs, and garden is like a paradise. That they had everything that they could think of. Their needs were taken care of, right? But there's also one tree in that garden was called the knowledge of good and evil. And God told them, look, from every tree in the garden you can eat, you can enjoy, everything is yours, but from that tree, the knowledge of good and evil, you should not eat, or if you do, that day you should surely die, right? Now when scholars, right, the theological scholars, they look at that story, right, so the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is not just an understanding, it's not like an intellectual knowledge of good and evil. When Hebrews sort of wrote the Old Testament, they talk about knowledge and good and evil. They were talking about that tree. Once you were eat of it, you had the power to actually decide the moral right and wrong. So the knowledge, in this sense, the knowledge of good and evil is not just receipt of the knowledge, but actually determining what is good and what is evil, right? Because God wanted to keep that, the idea of morality, what is good and evil, that was always going to be within the sphere of God. God was always going to be the one who decides what is good and what is evil for us. But then when we decide to take the power for ourselves, then that's where the trouble is going to happen. Because then when we want to take the place of God, then the fall happens, and that's kind of what then happens. So obviously, serpent came in, tempted Eve. Eve took the fruit. She ate. Adam ate. God saw them, and then He sent them out of the paradise. Right? He said, "I told you, if this happens, you've not wanted to listen to me. You thought that you knew better than I. You decided for yourself what is good and evil." Fine, you have your choice, but you'll get kicked out of the paradise, right? And the creation that we live in now is a consequence of that fall. Ground was cursed, death has appeared. Now we have limited lifespans, and we believe, as the Christians, theologians believe that these are all the consequences of that fall. But it's interesting, apart from, you can take that story either literally, some people do, some people take it more metaphorically, but I think the key point is that the story of Christianity is the one where it says we can either allow God to be God and submit ourselves to Him because He is ultimately the one who created us and He defined the moral standards, or we cannot do that and put ourselves in His place. But the history then of the Bible and of our human story today shows that whenever we decide to put ourselves in God's place, we're going to put ours, individually, and that means that if my needs conflict with your needs, we will go into a conflict, right? We see that on small scales with people sort of hurting one another, but we also see that at grand scale, such as when countries go at war with one another with limited resources, differences of opinion. We see the conflict developing when I think I'm right and I think I need something, but you're in my way or you're opposing me, and so we will go into conflict, right? This is where we try to take it upon ourselves to be the arbiters of justice, of right and wrong, and not allow ourselves to be humble and submitted to what God has decided. Now, do you think that there's something to be said about that story, about the learning, about the lessons from that?
I'm probably one of the people that see these kind of stories as metaphors, but there's so many different takes, and really you can try to intellectualize things, but what you feel today can change tomorrow depending on your moods and your information you have. And I tend not to get too stuck on things. I'm not a person that reads books in general. I tend to talk to people or listen to their talks. I'm not really a reader. I struggled to read when I was young, so I tended not to. Although I've read many journals, geographical things. But with the biblical stories and things like that, they're things I've heard sort of second hand. I've heard spoken in a very light way. I've never done any kind of strict Bible practice, and I'm very open to the idea that these things can be a metaphor, but also I can see from my life that people falling into traps where they try to design the world into how they imagine it to be, and the process of them doing that involves sometimes compromising good moral judgment. They have to be they have to think in monetary terms. So this can their goal they're trying to get to may be a good one, but the way they're going about it is going to cause harm to another. So the old sayings of what you gain, someone will have to suffer in order for you to take the gain. And sometimes people just are so driven that they're like, but I have to do this. I have free choice. It's my free will, and there you go. It's a justification for going ahead because the aim may be very, very good, but the process of getting there can be bad. So you see this in capitalism. You see it in socialism. The aims and the goals and the ideas are fantastic. You see it in the leaders, and you'll see it with people even like Elon Musk. Very entrepreneurial. They seem to have great passion, great ideas, but the process in getting to that goal can cause no end of damage, and it involves using many people perhaps who will have to be paid not so well. And so this is the problem when people almost playing God or believing that they have more power than they're sort of rightfully born with, if you like. Sometimes this is I notice this in a lot of atheistic people. They don't have any they don't like judgment. They don't want the idea that someone is looking over them, going to judge them, going to maybe persecute them in some way, and that's it. I'm going to do my own thing, and I think the result is become clear now.
Yeah.
And so really the proof is in the pudding. You know, you see how it's going. Obviously, we have short lifespans now. Maybe we lived longer before, so we can only reflect on back on the short time, and then we rely on books, stories of other people. But of course, there's more sayings. You know, history is written by the victors, and then things can just be altered, and errors can occur in the mix, and then you learn these, and you believe them to be true. Oh, they did this 300 years ago, then we should, you know, this is normal, we can continue. But we can't absolutely verify those facts. We don't have these lifespans where we can do that. Yeah, we have a lot of stories, but really this is the problem. This is why I tend to just deal in the present as much as possible. Obviously, we are what we were, so we are a composite of history, but really you have to deal with things as you see them, and act with I think what most humans have in their hearts. You know, they have good hearts, and they have good, you know, they have morals, but they find more and more they have to compromise those, or put things. I will be this person at this point, but right now I can't be that person. And these are the compromises that we have, and more more so in the modern world.
It's interesting, right? Because I think I would agree. I mean, even for the people who, let's say, you know, have never heard of, you know, the Ten Commandments, or what kind of moral standards or anything like that, or read books, their conscience, right, is there to pretty much, they know, right? If they've done something wrong, their conscience is going to remind them, and you know, give them unease about the thing they're about to do, the evil that they're planning, and you know, again, Christians would say, look, this is a gift of God, even for a person in the jungle who's never had a schooling or any formal education. Every single person has an inherent sense of right and wrong, and you know, if nothing else, that is the thing that is going to be either, you know, releasing you or accusing you, because you'll know what you've done, kind of thing.
Sure. But I mean, yeah, I mean, if you take you know, a commandment like "Thou shalt not kill," unfortunately, you know, just being a human being, and you know, there's an accidental chance of killing an insect or a small, you know, animal, and then, but people don't expect to be judged on every single accident in their lives. But then on a larger scale, when it comes to human, there is an innate thing where it seems more than just what we've been taught by our parents. There's something inside of us that would well, to at least most of the population, that they would not kill another human being, or they would not do it lightly, without provocation or without, you know, a sense. Of course, there's always an exception. There are people that maybe don't have those kind of senses. They might even have some damage, or they may have some trauma where they were done onto, and then they do to somebody else. It is often the victim become the victimizer. But generally, I believe there is something. Maybe it's like a resonant pattern, maybe from the heart, or maybe it's in the head, or perhaps it's in the spiritual realm. You know, this is the trouble, where you don't know where it's coming from, but there does seem to be something inherent that just indicates that, you know, that you really shouldn't steal, you shouldn't kill, you shouldn't do these things. There seems to be this innate core in people
Yeah.
that just automatically tells them, this is wrong, this is right.
Exactly, and the word conscious means it's conscience. That's the two parts of that word means with knowledge. With knowledge. That means we do certain things, and when the conscience accuses us of it, that means that we've gone against it with knowledge. It's like a premeditated thing, first degree, if you will, murder, and it doesn't have to, again, just going back to the Bible a little bit, Jesus took it to another level. He said, look, even one thing is he said you have heard it said you shall not murder, but then he took it another level. He said, but if you even harbor murderous thoughts towards your fellow neighbor, it is all as you've murdered them in your heart. So from his perspective, and then he did the same about adultery. He said, you have heard it to say you shall not take another man's wife, but I tell you that even if you desire in your heart, you fantasize, and you in your mind you sort of plot almost like how you will flirt, or how would take someone else's spouse. Sure. You are already on the path. You're very deeply down the path of actually sin, right? And that's because we're thinking, oh, I haven't done it yet, but in our minds we've crossed that threshold. To us it's become normal. It just hasn't given birth to it yet. Sure. That process. So I guess with that said, right, you talked about a little bit about kind of judgment and that sort of idea. What's your thought, right, at the end of our lives? Will there be some sort of a reckoning? Will there be a retrospective? Will there be a judgment? Or do we just sort of, our atoms that make us up, we go into the ground, the energy goes to energy, a different format, and matter becomes a different type of matter. What's your sort of take on things?
It's a tricky one. I don't tend to think about it too much, because I just tend to just get on with the living thing. I think contemplating death is something I used to do as a child, and I must have believed that it was just a dark place with nothing, and it was quite traumatic. I had quite many years of this, so I've kind of I feel that I've lived through that. I've kind of done that contemplation about that, and it's quite traumatic for me. So I tended to go the other way, because it was a very dark thing, especially for a child to cope with. And I wasn't able to tell anybody else, so it was very hard. But it's quite simple. My coping mechanism for this these feelings I used to have was to take on the possibility that really death is just the time before you were born, and it's not a time that you can really imagine, but it wasn't a painful time, and so I see death. I would agree that death is like it's dematerializing, perhaps losing this this form that you perhaps will not ever get again. And then if your spirit can go out into wherever this realm is, whatever this energy is, which brings up the subject of as much as there's frequency and energy, perhaps there's another realm of consciousness, and it's something that the idea has been thrown around a bit. I've heard it the last few years. Perhaps there is actually just a realm of consciousness, and perhaps consciousness is or actually intention is what creates things. If the consciousness is there and there's an intention, then that's how we tend to then go on to the next level, and then physically or mentally create something. So it's very hard to imagine what it is. I don't personally believe that it's quite as black and white, good and bad, and so I don't think there would be really a judgment. I don't think I think humans maybe sometimes think too much of themselves. Um, they imagine that God is gonna sort of if they believe, then He's gonna come on into a realm and then give them a kind of a judgment. It's a bit like uh, people are used to rewards and levels of achievement, say through college or through sports. They get a medal. So will I get a bronze? Is God going to give me a bronze? Is He going to give me a silver? Is He going to give me a gold?
Yeah.
And I think it's a way of thinking in a very limited. I mean, it's not to disrespect, but it's a very limited way of thinking. Have I attained this? It's a lot of things is about materialism and have I achieved this purity, this goal, this I think there's this idea that I grew up with that the most purest person would be the monk, it would be the Buddha type figure, the person up in Tibet in the mountain, living a very quiet, subdued life, not causing any harm. But later I've come to think, well, actually, that is a person that you would have automatic respect for, but they're a person that is away from society.
Exactly. And they're not contributing.
Yeah, and also they're just not challenged.
Enough,
If you come here, you could be challenged by so many things. Children running around crazily. Somebody tried to mug you, kill you. Somebody that just wants to stop and have a chat. There's so many things. There's so many more challenges, it seems, in these kind of settings. But that's not to say that the people who are, doing their meditation, doing their time, doing their spiritual practice, aren't challenged regularly, because just through words, just through thought, there's challenges that will come in, and so they're doing their work, and they're doing their personal work, and personal work should be the first work and is the most important. But at the same time, people in this kind of setting, they just have far more distractions and challenges, and people will be asking you for your contribution, your tax, and I think a lot of people are overwhelmed by that, because there's a lot of, as much as you're expected to give, there's a lot of taking as well. And opportunistic people, and just there's a lot of systems now that automatically will just demand your attention. Your phone will send notifications, and you feel this. Some people feel the need to do it. I would feel the need not to do it, and then perhaps find myself in trouble when I haven't responded to something. There's different challenges for different choices in different places, and I just don't think there's it's absolutely, everyone is absolutely unique, and there's just trillions and trillions of variations of one person. Even if you look the same, you're the same culture, there's a million variations, health problems, there's so many things that can manifest. There's a uniqueness, so there's not just one idea, one solution for everyone. And so again, with the question of what happens at the end, I think it is becoming more and more irrelevant, because for me it's just obvious that I just need to do the best I can do now, try to get as much knowledge, be as open as I can, and if I see I'm failing a bit, try to make an alteration. I think that's the best that a human being can really achieve at this time, until they become some kind of bionic system, maybe integrated with, I think the idea is to integrate humans with technology, then you maybe then be able to achieve something larger, something bigger. But
maybe that will come at
yeah.
the cost of free will, right? Because ultimately that is the differentiator, right?
Sure.
When we are given free will, we choose to do things. Again, going back to the previous point, right, of what we think is right, and not necessarily what the other person thinks is right. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, in fairness to the technocracy type people, their argument could be, well, if there's a God that judges you and you have to follow a certain path in a certain way, then what's the difference between that and then us giving you a system and a path and certain procedures that you have to follow?
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to start integrating with technology, you will have to know how the program works and fit into how the program's parameters.
Yeah.
So you could see that in a godly sense.
Yeah.
And so it's that control thing. Do we really have free choice? Is there really such a thing as freedom? It seems more and more that ultimately we still have to follow in a certain direction. The universe seems to require that you do this, otherwise you pay a consequence.
Yeah.
You can get away with things for so long, but eventually, if you keep maybe jumping off the tree or jumping to the thing, then 100 times, 101 times, it could be the last time that you do it. So there does seem to be a governing force that we do have to follow. We don't have true free will, but then we've never had more freedom perhaps than we have in these years, in this millennium perhaps.
That's interesting, because I think this idea, maybe I'll put a label to it, because I recently sort of did a bit of research on it, like determinism, right? Whether everything is kind of determined in this world, right? Or to put it in a different way, right? So are our thoughts kind of reducible to neurons, right? In our, is matter giving rise to consciousness, or is the other way around? Is consciousness actually using matter to sort of apply itself? And the kind of my understanding, the recent kind of advances in science and neuroscience specifically are saying, no, actually you cannot say that the matter gives rise to conscience. And actually the idea that neurons, bouncing around and somehow determining our thoughts and our actions is not logical. It's not proven in science. And yes, neurons play a huge role in what consciousness is, but it doesn't create consciousness, right? And then that creates a next question, right? So where does consciousness come from? And if consciousness and an expression, one of the biggest expressions of consciousness is our free will, where does that sort of come from, if not from matter, right? And those are big questions. Those are huge questions. But I guess the reason I'm even pointing it out is I think my understanding is that there is something more than the matter. There's different theories of how this sort of really works, but to me, it's we are beings of consciousness, of spirituality, that kind of rises above just the physical, just the physical who we are, and there is a sense of, I think, free will that we have, to the extent that we are masters of a destiny. To an extent, obviously we're factors of our environments, and there's things that we cannot control. But in terms of what we do, our thoughts, we have freedom over those. That's just my understanding of it. But just going to another point, you mentioned, or we talked about kind of what happens after life, and now I'm coming from a Christian perspective, right? So. I'm very curious to know, so how do you understand, kind of Christian worldview of what happens after life and death, and if there is a heaven and hell, who goes to heaven, who goes to hell? I think you mentioned a few points previously about that, around sort of rising up to a specific level of goodness, maybe, or maybe a little bit. Just I'm very curious to know, how do you understand the Christian worldview in that sense?
I really don't have any understanding. I think after the age of maybe 10 or 11,
Right.
I was no longer required to go to church, for example, and of course, being a child, maybe not very bright, I just saw church and religion as the same thing. It was just it was like going to a discotheque. That's where dancing happened.
Right.
So really, I never really engaged, and I wasn't curious. My mother was an atheist, and I spent most of my time with her, and there was a lot of. It seemed that politics had taken over, especially in the 80s, and she was very left, and my father was right. And so that took precedent, and so religion and curiosity about religion for me at that point was finished. And obviously I was going to school and having my struggles, just doing those things. So very much a modern child, and predominantly my mother's side would be non-religious. And so I have really no idea about the ideas of Christianity, just from history, things that are related to history, and things that have occurred and obviously my family is a mix. So my family in France, in Ireland, there was a massive religious, especially the Roman Catholic Church, had a massive effect, mostly negative, but some positivity with it as well. And so I could only relate certain bites of knowledge to perhaps a program or a journal I read in Geographical magazine that talked about an individual who was religious, a leader perhaps, and what they might have believed. But obviously, I subconsciously I know a lot more because I've sat in church, and especially on my Irish side, my grandmother was devout. She would be a devout. She would go to Lourdes, and so subconsciously I must know a great deal of things. But if somebody asked me the question, what would you consider to be your thought on this Christian belief? I honestly, I just couldn't think of the belief at all, because religion has absolutely nothing to do with my say adult life. Although I've lived with people that are Jehovah's Witness, that are Roman Catholic, that are Christian, or some people that are just they're not culturally engaged with religious practice, but they live their lives and their structure as if it was. So I lived with people from Colombia, and they've been quite religious to a degree, and so I've been affected very much. But in terms of what I know about the preachings and the beliefs, I have absolutely no idea. Just because I'm a very individualistic person, and maybe quite selfish, and so I've never thought to engage with somebody and say, right, so as a Christian, what do you believe about this and this and the other, which is, now I'm reflecting, is it maybe a shame. It's maybe a shame, but I honestly I really don't know about
Well, I mean I fully agree with you. There's so much baggage there, right? I mean, I was born in a Roman Catholic country, and I thought I knew. I like the word they use, subconsciously. I thought I was a Christian. What other Christian can you be? I mean, surely I went to church and I grew up, and what was wrong with me? But it really, until I was in my 30s, that I was like, what do I believe, and what is this Christianity all about? So I started reading and researching. But let me maybe take this opportunity just to see if I can present it in a very short form. would be curious to see if that's how you remember it, sort of subconsciously or otherwise, right? So the idea is, and I'll try to put it in a way not to color it by specific denominational understanding or Roman Catholic, Protestant, or anything like that, right? I'll try to speak basics and speak core, right? The idea being that we are sinners, right? And what is a sin? Sin is not just a guilty delight, or you had a little bit too much chocolate, or you had a little bit too much to drink, but the sin is defined as something that we, like I said before, we do things that we know in our conscience are wrong, or that we know that God has told us not to do, or that we fail to do things that He's told us to do. I mean, I think these are the things that are like the golden rule: treat others as you would like them to treat you. And when we haven't treated others as we would like them to treat you, or something more overt, like where we're outright consciously lied, stolen, desired, like I said, had adulterous thoughts and other things. That's what's called sin, and those are the things that ultimately separate us from God, because God is in its nature. He is holy, means that He does not tolerate presence of sin. He would many times in the past He has taken quite a wrathful kind of angry approach with sin and people who have presumptuously taken His blessings, and he would destroy them, like Sodom and Gomorrah. He's destroyed them because they were steeped in sin. It wasn't just like, occasionally there was just people of sin and He's destroyed them, right? So He doesn't like sin, right? And so, but we have a problem now, because every single human is a sinner, right? That's like at the core doctrine of Christianity. That every single human has, not Pope, not Mother Teresa, not that monk on a mountain somewhere. No one can say that they are bringing a clean sheet before God. Everyone has fallen short in his perfect set of expectations, right? And then the problem is, well, who can approach God? Who can have a place in His kingdom? Who can have a place in heaven? How is that possible when we're all fallen creatures? When we will not have an excuse? How is that possible, right? And this is then the Christian unique message that is separates it from Islam, separates from Buddhism, separates from Hinduism, and that is that God sent His Son, right, Jesus, who actually paid for all of our sins, right, on the cross. So God provides a solution. So He doesn't expect us to improve ourselves. He knows that we can't. Notwithstanding what you said earlier, we should all work on ourselves. We should all look to see how we can improve the things that we can improve. But God knows that in our heart we're corrupted. That I've tried to sort of stop sinning for like a day, and then the next day I'm like, oh man, that's just didn't work, right? I know what I've done, right? Anyway, the idea is that He knows that we are fallen creatures. He knows that in our heart we're broken. But rather than expecting us to rise, pull ourselves up our bootstraps, He said, look, I will provide a solution. Solution will be me, myself, taking the punishment that you deserve, taking it on the cross, and taking it for the entire humanity. Not just for the Jews 2,000 years ago, but for the people who, even before Jesus, they were looking forward to one to come. And then following Jesus' death and resurrection, those who live now, even today, who look backwards at that singular moment in history, that death on the cross and resurrection, which for Christianity says, look, God's Son, died, take the punishment that we deserved. He took it upon Himself, and so the books are balanced. Right. So the books, if I'm bringing a balance sheet to God at the end of my life, I will say, God, these books are balanced not because I've done a lot of more right than wrong, but these are balanced because you have balanced them yourself. Your Son Jesus has paid for those mistakes, and it's taken upon Him the death that I deserve, right? And so that is called the good news, right? The gospel, so to speak, and that is what all branches of Christianity agree on. We are sinners and God has saved us, right? So and that's unique, because in every other religion you will hear, like in Islam you will hear, well, you will never know until the end, you just have to throw yourself at God's mercy, and You just have to hope that you've done more good than bad throughout your life. In Hinduism, there's multiple gods and there's multiple reincarnations of God, and you might reincarnate yourself in the next life, depending on how you live this life, as a higher creature or a lower creature, until you reach a stage of some sort of ultimate nirvana, right? And Buddhism says, well, look, God is in everything, everything is God. There is no such a thing as called God, but if you reach a state of non-existence, almost like that's nirvana, where you stop caring about reality, but you just throw yourself in the ether kind of thing. That's nirvana. You don't think about specifics, you just sort of abandon yourself. There's no self. It's Buddhism. And Christianity says God has saved you because you couldn't save yourself, right? So that is the good news. That means that we can. It's not that it gives us license to sin, quite the opposite. It gives you thankfulness. It gives you a desire to follow the one who saved you, to be more like him. And he also tells us that he gave us the Holy Spirit, which is one of the three persons of you mentioned in the beginning. Who is the us when God speaks of us? Well, he speaks of himself as Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. That's the traditional, the plural usage of Elohim, which is the Hebrew word for gods. Traditionally it's meant Holy Spirit, Father, and the Son. Those are the three persons who are sharing the God nature, the singular Godhead, God nature. So so that's what God did. That he did that for us, his creature, so he would restore us into the right relationship with him. Sorry, I went on there for a little bit of long monologue, but is that sort of resonating? Is that something you remembered hearing?
That resonates quite a lot, especially the part about sinning and things like that. Just remembering my reactions of my mother to the idea of sin and things like that. So it definitely it just does bring back a few memories and I understand the crux of the idea. It's quite. I think most people do. They just don't reflect on it much, so it's not something they can talk on. But when they hear it, they're like, it kind of clicks, and it's very. But it's it's sort of one of the oldest passed down stories, ideas that there's ever been. That this idea of what God is, and it's the oldest story, if you like. That and most children, certainly in the Western world, they're very familiar with it. But unfortunately, a lot of people just don't delve into it. Probably people like me, they get distracted and then they're onto something. Other things seem to take more importance, and just the survival instincts aspects overrides that. As with children, that they're more open to things, and they seem to be freer and easier. But as an adult, you tend to lose that about yourself, and you become more structured and slightly more narrow. You have to keep attention. You have to show that you are. Have you gone to the next level, and you can't act childish anymore. So you have to lose something. And I know certainly from myself that I've lost a lot of my wonder about things. Just being in nature sometimes, I just don't have that. The passion that used to conjure up, this is kind of is kind of weaker now. It can come back in on a beautiful day, but it's not as it was. So these things fall away. These ideas, these principles, they fall away, and other people's, and I think just politics of just people just seems to take over. The day-to-day, but you do hear a lot of people pining for their youth, pining for before they were married, and perhaps just running away to a desert island, or you hear this, people saying these things, especially in the older generations. 40, 50 and 60s, you hear this a lot. So
That's
yeah,
right,
it gets kind of flushed out of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately, what remains is sometimes not very helpful, because a lot of the people
Mm.
that I would speak to, they would describe themselves as Christian, right? And I would tell, okay, great. Well, tell me a little bit what that means to you. What changes in your life have been had, and what makes you different than the Muslim or anyone else, right?
Mm.
And yeah, like you say, it's usually when people say they're Christian, they mean culturally. So they would occasionally go to church, they would remember the stories, they would understand that they are expected to be good and do good. But unfortunately, somehow they forget this amazing fact that actually they've been saved by God, right? And so it's not so much that they need to strive to be better. Sure, yeah, we should learn and we should look at the example that's been set by Jesus. But hey, the big news, the good news is that you have been saved because you couldn't save yourself. I mean, that to me, and you can see their eyes open, right? Because you're like, you know what? That's right. I remembered. That was the story, right? That's the crux. That's the essence. And they've forgotten it. I don't know why. Maybe it's the busyness of life. Maybe it's the realities we all face. The what sort of hits us every day. That tends to sort of go out the brain. But it's such a, I think, wonderful, truth to me. Certainly something that's been a key factor sort of in my own life. Yeah. I mean, would you say that where you are right now in terms of kind of where you said there's a lot of things in the past that you've remembered and things that you've been taught, and life takes a pace of its own. Is that something that you would be interested in looking into in the future? Are you kind of, would you describe yourself, you're in a spiritual journey, you are keen and open to having another look at the Christian claims, those kinds of things? Not that I'm not here to sign you up to anything by any means. I'm just curious to see if that's something that
I think where I am now, it would probably tend to be more individualistic than probably ever, especially as my mother passed away about 5-6 years ago. It took me a long time to get over it, but when I did, I really had to reach another level inside of me and not have this little backup, not have this person to fall back on, even to just to have a discussion, because she was a very open-minded, free kind of person, and probably, yeah, I'd say that one of the better friends that I ever had. So we could also be in silence together, which is very rare that you can do. So I've had to come to something inside of myself, the feeling to carry on, because I was in deep depression and really not wanting to carry on, but at the same time not wanting to end it myself. So I just forced myself into the survival instinct, and now I've gone past many hurdles, and I keep falling and getting back up. It's become very like a way of life for me, not following media, and not following certain norms that a lot of people, especially in the Western society, have. I've always been a bit more sort of spiritual. I've always been a quieter type of person who's easily overwhelmed. So, but rather than doubting myself and always being negative, I can see the positivity in what I've gone through and where I've come to. Sometimes the trauma and the really unfortunate things contribute to making you what you are. Obviously, you have certain personality traits that you could trace back to a child, but I think with me, a lot of what the trauma I've gone through has really structured my life, good and bad, but it's made me a very independent person. And so I don't feel the need. I have a choice now. This is now I'm really becoming aware that I've got all these choices. I can take a course in anything I want to do. I can open up the internet and I can inquire into any subject that I want, and it's an amazing time. But at the same time, a lot of information isn't necessarily going to make things better for you, and so you can, again, I'm not a person that likes to be overwhelmed, and so I try and pick and choose, what I can handle, and of course with the internet that's been around, say, 15 years, I've had a lot of alternate views that I've inquired into, or it's been projected out, sometimes for people to manipulate other people, or to draw you into something. And I have been victim to this, and I've fallen into some new age ideas, various ideas, but there are certain concepts that I've heard about, and as much as I resonate with certain religious things, I also resonate with these ideas. And there's ideas that come from, say, astrology, or people that follow astrology, and their idea of sin and the idea of Christ. They believe
it's a Christ consciousness. I know, I've heard of that. Yes.
They believe that it's more to do with the planetary systems, being the 12 and the representation of the 12, and the etymology, I think it is, of certain words. So being that we use the word sin, but you have a synagogue, and the origins of words and where they come from fascinates me. And as I become more, I try to become more knowledgeable, and so it could be even try to be more intellectual. You have to be open to these ideas in order to expand and have really a good grounding of everything. You've got to expose yourself to other people and to other ideas, and so but the good thing is, with these modern ways of doing it, you can take it in and you can then put it down, you can put it away, you can come back to it, you can rest on it. And I found with religion that often when I was around it, when someone had the idea that you might want to join in, it was like all or nothing. You're full in, or you're out, sort of thing. And I know that I've upset people by saying things that might be, say, of a Buddhist ideal. Not that I read Buddhism, but I might say to a Jehovah's Witness that God is within, and God is inside as well as everywhere, and it hasn't gone down very well, and so then you would be sort of, not to exaggerate, but you're sort of blacklisted to a degree. And so because I'm very much of my mother's personality, and since she's died I seem to have become even more so. It's almost as if I've absorbed some of her I don't know, soul.
Healthy skepticism, maybe.
Well, it's not even skepticism. I just feel that her traits have just I've just realised how many traits I have of hers,
right.
And I just happened to be in the presence of my mother when she died. So it was one of those was very surreal time for me, and these things tend to really affect you mentally, and you can take on things. You might even I've realized I might have even taken on some extra traits of hers because of this trauma, because I was so it was such a heavy situation that went over a couple of days. It's almost like I absorbed something in, and perhaps my trauma of losing that this person made me almost be like them. It's a very weird thing, and that's not trying to say that you're taking God's place in His decision or anything like that. But literally as a coping mechanism, you would do things like that. So, cut to this time of my life, I've never been so self-confident, and I've never felt so like empowered, because I think I'm 1 year from 50, and I think, God, if I've come this distance, I must have done something right. It can't be. I've made so many mistakes and lost so many things, and lost jobs, and had so many arguments. But to have got to this point and not have done anyone any grievous, really bad harm, and not sacrifice my principles for money, just for money, then I think I must have done something right. And so, if somebody wants to say to me that's the grace of God, I'm willing to accept that. If someone is going to say, you're lucky, okay, if you like, but I don't really believe in luck. But maybe I'm lucky. Maybe I'm 3 times unlucky, but that 1 time lucky is enough to get me to where I am. So I'm very open, and I don't feel I need an answer to that. It's just that I am, and I'm lucky, as in I'm fortunate to have this life. And compared to where I was a few years ago, I certainly wasn't feeling fortunate to have that, to have what I have and be where I am. But when you fall into victimhood, when you fall into self-pity, this is where you end up. And I don't even know if I'm an atheist or not sometimes, but it doesn't matter, because whoever I meet, I treat them as the same as anybody else, and I'm willing to listen to what they have to say, and if they're willing not to throw it on to me, I will happily spend hours. I've had conversations with people in supermarkets for 2 hours talking about Islam and things like that, and it's just been an amazing conversation. Sometimes one-way conversation, sometimes two-way, and it's ended very well, and everyone's parted with a smile, and a person I will never see again, and so it's perhaps that is a God-given thing, the ability to be able to do that, to have that, and the consequence just to leave fulfilled, happy, no argument, no resentment, and I've had that situation many times, and I feel that that's not an accident. I do feel that there is another, it was meant to be, and perhaps I attract these things, perhaps. I don't know. Maybe it is just pure synchronicity. I use the word synchronicity to not things coincide, but when it happens
So many
on such a
times,
regular, then you think, no, there's something on another level here.
yeah.
And so I'm very open to the idea of it being God, but I'm also open to it being an energetic universe where energies are attracted to each other, and they will collide, and then something will be created from those two energies together. You know, a singularity, duality, you know, coming together. Um, and that's how, say, a child is born, if you want to put it into those terms. So yeah, I'm quite open to it. I don't feel I need to follow any kind of doctrine. What's important to me is that I tidy up some things that I've let loose, and I really feel that it's gonna have to be, it's gonna be me primarily that has to do that, because you know, the story that you know that you were talking about with the Adam and Eve story, you know, you're given a choice, and it's like, you can do it my way or you can do it your way. It's your choice, you know, but there is a choice that has to be made. And I feel that I haven't been in control of my life for many years. I've let other people control things. I've never had more control than now, and I feel that it's worth me trying to improve me. But you know, if I keep falling, or if I keep failing, then I will at some point have to reach out, and stop being the stubborn man who, you know, I mean, I've taken things to an incredible extent where I wouldn't visit a doctor, I wouldn't visit certain governmental offices and things like that. So I've taken it perhaps to a higher level than most people here. Most people rely on the system, or the health system, national health, or of some kind. I've chosen not to. I'm still alive. I don't know how long how it's gonna last. Obviously, we get older. Most of us have something breaks, fails. But again, I don't like to use the word negative and positive too much, but it's certainly not going to help me being on the negative side on the spectrum, because I feel that I've been there, and positivity and following a set of rules. I don't know if they're man-made rules, or they actually are universal, or they are from a god, but there do seem to be certain rules, and I just need to brush up a bit and take on a few more of them, as I feel I can handle it, and then I feel that I can really achieve and get to a very good level where I think I've had a full life, and I've done more good than harm. And I don't necessarily believe there's a heaven. I don't necessarily believe there's a final judgment. But I do believe that we are, you know, in a sense, whatever the creator is, whether it's God, you're nowhere close. You know, you don't come close. You know, if you want to call it sin, if you want to call it, you know, a fallen creature, if you want to call it 666, mark of the beast, you can call it whatever you like. You know, you'll never be as great as God. You know, and you know, the word God, you know, put another O in it, good. You know, and so I don't think you'll ever be as good. But I don't think that's the point. If God created everything, then why did he create a creature that was not in perfect harmony with him? Why did he give him certain choices and traits that would perhaps, you know, lead most people to fall into a sort of a trap, if you like. So there must be a reasoning behind it. And it's not the fact that you're born into sin, I think, is important. It's just, you know, it's not where you start, it's where you end up. I think, you know, as an animal, you know, the young can be given birth to and virtually walk straight away. For a child, a human child, it can take anywhere between, you know, 8 months to even, you know, 15 months to even be able to walk on two legs. So there must be a reason why humans walk on 2 legs. You know, why would God do that? You know, he'd say, well, you've got 4 limbs, you know, just use 4 of them. But you know, there must be a reason why, you know, that's happened. You could say, you know, it's a genetic accident. But you could also have the right to say, no, God's intended that to be the case, because you're here for a special purpose, to do something different from the animals. But you still need to live. You still are an animal in the physical sense, but as a conscious being, he's created something else. He's put something else into the mix, and perhaps that was an unnecessary thing that the Creator, the God, had in mind, to go to a next level. So yeah, there's so many ways to look at it. I don't feel in my life that I need to jump to us, but I do need to be open to other people's opinions, and try not to get too channeled into just self. So as much as it's great you learn a lot from going into self, you know, absolute selfishness is also not the answer, and you really have to forget self sometimes, and you do have to serve others and other people. And I think, you know, I haven't read the Bible, but I'm sure that's in there. I'm sure that God absolutely is like, yep, that's right, you've got it, you've worked it out, you know. One of the, you know, the biggest sins is just absolutely, you know, the self-obsession, and just really caring about too much about yourself, and what you're going to get out of life, and not really caring about, well, you know, the person next to you is going to get you because you don't have a relationship with them, or, you know, they have more money than you. Well, but does that mean that they still have a equal chance? Surely, you know. So yeah, the self is important. It's number one, just in terms of navigating. But really, you're nothing without other people. Really, I think we are a species that are supposed to be together. And then, you know, of course, you know, how are the next generation going to be born if we truly become these, you know, these kind of cold zombie sort of tectonic kind of entities? I don't think that that would be God's idea of heaven on earth. You know, so.
No, thank you very much. I mean, it's been a fascinating discussion. I appreciate it. I think you've given a good portrayal kind of where you are right now, so I really respect and appreciate that. And I do think it's the, you know, God's grace that He lets you have experiences like these, and you know, it sounds like you're not close to the opinion of a possibility that there might be a further kind of closing in of any distances between you and God in the future, and maybe that just needs to happen naturally through the process that you just sort of said. You need to go through a couple of things, and then other things might happen as well. So I would just commend to you that you know, He's there, he loves you, He loves me, He loves everyone that He's created. He seeks us, He calls us, and we're just a prayer away. And if we want to know what He's like, you know, He's given us the letter, the Bible to read through, but obviously the meditation and prayer is there another thing that we have as at our disposal to speak to him.
Mm.
So no, just
Yeah,
encourage you
which
to at
is-
your own time, at your own pace,
Mm.
to pursue those things. And
Yeah, I think obviously you have this thing where you have to work, and you have this kind of goal of getting to 65, and then I will do something.
Yeah.
So I have an opportunity, perhaps because I don't have a family, to fit that in before that time, and I
Yeah.
think that might be important. So if I can do that, I think putting myself in a quieter environment that where I can be around more spiritual people, or people that follow religion more to the book, or to real practice. That would be a benefit to me. I think it would really do. To be honest, where I am now, it doesn't seem to be anywhere I am.
Yeah.
So that means I have to search for it, and that's always the tricky bit. It's fitting it in, and just the fatigue of, and wanting to have your downtime mentally makes it hard for that to fit in. I've always been lucky to have accidents where I've gone to certain countries and I've just fallen into situations, and they happen to be more spiritual, more religious people, and then I've been around that, and it's had an effect and a consequence, or I've lived with those people. But where I am now, it seems to be less and less, and I do feel that there is there's something going on in terms of media and things where they seem to be demonizing certain practices and almost introducing an alternative, which I'm not really happy about.
Which
so,
is a philosophy in itself, right? They're replacing one for another, but they're calling this
Yeah.
one bad, and this one is now the
Yeah.
in. The popular one.
I don't like. I'm not convinced. They're gonna have to do a lot more work to convince me of this. So I feel I'm lucky to be able to acknowledge that, and I just feel that my energy now is I could just open me up to have a conversation with you, and that is it's so valuable. It's it'll be the highlight of my weekend. It'll be the thing I remember. The rest would be pretty irrelevant. So that's a special thing. And,
Thank you so much
Thank
for your
you.
time.